Welcome to this new episode of my podcast, A Digital Tomorrow. Today, I'm joined by David Namdar. Welcome, David.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
It's actually a pleasure to host you today. And well, for those of you who might not know David yet, David is a GP at Coral Capital and co-founder of NFT.com. He's also an experienced investor and entrepreneur, and was a founding partner of Galaxy Digital and Solid X Partners, digital asset-focused financial services firms. He has over 15 years of international business and financial market experience, and has been involved in strategy, business development, and advisory of dozens of companies, and investment in 100 companies and decentralized currencies. Well, as I said before, it's a pleasure for me to host you here today, David.
Thanks again.
Well, looking at your biography, which I just summarized right now, we can see that you started more in traditional finance, and then you transitioned towards FinTech and DeFi, eventually becoming, as I said, GP at Coral Capital, etc. So could you please tell our listeners a bit more about your personal journey, like what made you decide to transition into FinTech and enter this new area or this new world?
Of course. So for me, and it's interesting to see your background, to see Hong Kong there, because I have a special affinity and love for Hong Kong, and it's been a big part of my life and career. I was from New York. I went to university in Los Angeles, and I was fortunate I had the opportunity to do a study abroad in Hong Kong, and then to start my career out there at UBS. And I really credit, not just for some of the risk taking that I had done in my lifetime, but I credit my time in Hong Kong for opening my eyes to digital currencies, and partly because the average person in Hong Kong, in some other Asian cities, in Tokyo, in Australia, different parts, are all thinking about multiple currencies. They're not just thinking about their local currencies. The average person in Hong Kong is thinking about the Hong Kong dollar, the Chinese yuan, the British pound, the US dollar. And so because of that, the idea of thinking in multiple currencies kind of gave them a heads up or an advantage to then think about Bitcoin and digital currencies as a new currency born from the internet. And so for me, and a lot of the work I was doing at UBS and trading, there was an FX transaction that happened on the back of a lot of the investments we were making. So we always had to keep that in mind. And then more and more, as I was first introduced to Bitcoin, I think as early as 2011, and then when I finally started to pay attention to and explore and meet other people that were curious about it in 2012 and 2013, really I have a lot to credit for my time in Hong Kong because of that.
Nice. Well, thanks for sharing this, and I agree regarding your remarks about Hong Kong and Asia. No? I mean, it's a different world in that sense. You are much more exposed, to so many different currencies, digital and non-digital ones. So it's of course an interesting journey. And well, moving forward, I would like to talk a bit about blockchain and cryptos, NFTs, which are areas in which you are an expert, of course. So starting from the very beginning, how do you think that blockchain can improve our societies? I mean, how would you describe the main advantages offered by blockchain?
Well, I guess so. Again, to add one more thing, kind of from the beginning, and when I first was attracted to it, is during the period of 2007, 2010, as there was this global reset during the great financial crisis, the global financial crisis, it caused a lot of people who had long careers in the traditional financial world, a lot of people who came from the residential and mortgage and credit world, and then a lot of other industries, to really pause and question what the largest financial institutions were doing and the role they played in exacerbating the crisis. And so what that kind of laid the groundwork for was for people to start questioning those centralized systems of authority, whether they are financial institutions or large companies or governments. And so, that's really one of the important starting points, because the idea of digital currency had been around for decades before. There were cypherpunks, there were a number of early experimentations with early digital currencies, And now with the introduction of Bitcoin, there were a number of key problems that it solved. One of them famously known as the Byzantine generals problem. But essentially, at the simplest level, it's just in moving from a system where we were fully reliant on centralized systems or to a lot of decentralized systems being experimented with or kind of conceived for the first time. That's really what the early promise of Bitcoin and blockchain technology provided. And then now over the last, what's been 8, 9 years, 10 years, and I think Bitcoin, just had its 13th birthday. In the number of different cycles that have happened, we've seen a lot of that experimentation as we move from, okay, here's certain centralized systems and here's some decentralized ideas. And a lot of them didn't work. And then we try again in the next cycle and here's some more decentralized ideas and some of these started to work. And now in the current state of the world that we're in, a lot more of the decentralized systems and applications are actually starting to be played around with and starting to see some success.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that cryptocurrencies can actually revolutionize the way we deal with money?
Well, I think they already have.
Mm-hmm.
I think when I first started a number of years ago with working with a large family office, and on a Saturday night at midnight, we were able to do a $20 million transaction and pay a total cost of, I think it was $10 or $20, right? For one, that isn't possible still today in the existing financial systems infrastructure, right? And for two, and to do it at that, with that scale and at that low fees, but not that it's just for doing large transactions. I think what Bitcoin is, and I like to remind people, everybody has a lot of times people who are doubting it or skeptics, they like to say, oh, it'll never replace the dollar, it'll never replace gold, it'll never do this, governments won't allow it. They have all of these different kind of apprehensions or resistances to it. And what I try to remind them is, they're putting or they're projecting kind of what they think it is or should be or needs to be. And the point is, the way that this whole thing has evolved, right? It's something different to a lot of different people. It doesn't have to be the same thing, and it doesn't have to satisfy all of any one person's needs. But what it is, it's a little bit like a currency, it's a little bit like a store of value, and it's a little bit of an experiment, right? And so when we think about it with those different properties, right, we're not projecting that it has to be anything, but really over the last number of years, it already has served a purpose in many countries around the world as a store of value. It already has acted like a currency for people. I came up with in 2017, 18, I came up with this line that Bitcoin and Ethereum had become the funding currencies for the entire digital asset ecosystem. And what I meant by that was that in order to participate and play in the whole digital asset world, people had to first buy Bitcoin or Ether and then use those to fund the next wave of innovation and opportunities. Now, the market's evolved even further to the point where people can skip Bitcoin and Ether. People can go onto a number of centralized exchanges, no OTC desks, or they can buy a number of other digital assets directly, so they don't have to invest into Bitcoin and Ether to access the investment opportunities. They can buy into Solana, they can buy into Polkadot or Avalanche, and then they could use those crypto assets to invest in those native ecosystems.
And talking about experiments, you mentioned now this word. So I wanted to ask you about the case of El Salvador, which, as you know, introduced Bitcoin as legal tender in September. So what do you think about this case? I mean, it's of course an interesting experiment. Do you think it will succeed and others will follow, or maybe that's not like maybe the rationale behind cryptos was not supposed to be that one? What do you think about this whole idea?
Yeah, so I've been enjoying and impressed by what the president of El Salvador has been able to achieve so far, and his position, and it's he's benefited from being open-minded and listening to a lot of people around him, and even I have a number of close friends here in Puerto Rico who've been part of the efforts to go to El Salvador, and actually other friends in the crypto community from around the world who went there and really helped the government in El Salvador get up to speed and really take a thoughtful approach to this. And at the same time, I think what he's seen, the president there, is that this has the chance to change the fate of certain small nations, being a little bit more open to technological innovation, attracting the innovators and technologists and capitalists and all of that to the country can really like improve the country's fortunes over the next couple of years and put them at the forefront of technological innovation. And so I think it's important to acknowledge, again, as an experiment, it's not going to be without friction. There'll be missteps, there'll be confusion, there'll be other things that happen as they try to do this. They'll deal with some backlash from other governments around the world that don't like to see it. But at the same time, I think it's been really an important step. And I think he just put out a prediction for this year that another 2 countries at least are going to follow suit and approve it as national tender. And I think that could be at the low end. I think we could end up seeing 5 or 10 different countries this year do it. I was talking to somebody earlier today, and when I look at the interesting thing about the playbooks that certain corporates and certain governments are doing now, or at least have set the seeds for, what Michael Saylor has done with MicroStrategy is a really important fundamental thing. He's essentially been using the existing financial system and the mechanisms available through first buying it off of his corporate balance sheet to now being able to lever up, to issue debt in order to acquire more Bitcoin and long-term debt for that matter at very low interest rates. He's been able to really like improve his company's balance sheet and give himself really like some nice levered upside to the growth of this digital asset. And what we're starting to see is, and what I expect a number of other countries to follow suit in now, is to do the same thing, to issue government debt in order to then acquire and load up on Bitcoin and digital assets on their balance sheets.
I see. You mentioned before from 5 to 10 countries, right? Which would be following El Salvador's steps. That's quite a lot.
Yeah, and then we've got 200 to go.
No, I know. I mean, it's compared to the total, it's not much, but still, like considering where we started, I think it's quite remarkable, no, to see so many countries trying to experiment on that area.
Yeah, it's one of these things that I think we'll see, and it'll continue to be a number of these smaller countries. Now, people forget, they think it's such a far-fetched thing. At the same time, right now, and I don't know the exact number, but I would estimate there's somewhere between 20 and 30 countries around the world, maybe more, that have an effective peg to the US dollar, right? And so, a lot of countries have already given up, their independence of their monetary system to another large global player, right? So giving that up to, or putting it into Bitcoin wouldn't be all that surprising.
That's true, yes. It makes sense. Then, you mentioned before that ideas like the one from El Salvador can actually cause friction with other countries. And it's undeniable that many people think that cryptos should be like even banned because they are like maybe too volatile, too risky. So what would you say to these people? Because it's all over the media. There are like crypto enthusiasts and many people who defend them, who trade them. But on the other hand, there's like many people who say like the opposite, that they are too risky because they are volatile or for whatever reason. So, how would you convince these people, or what would you say to them?
Sure. So, I guess now this is where there's also some aspects of the people who are participating in the cryptocurrency ecosystem, almost looking at it, there's also some aspects where it's a little bit like a religion, right? Now, when people believe in something, right, it's very hard to convince them of one thing or another. Now, not to discredit that belief, because at the same time, a lot of the advances in human civilization have been driven by belief and groups coming together under shared mission or shared visions of the future to then create the world that they see, right? And so that's happened, throughout the centuries for advancing certain individual countries and national borders, and that's helped shape the world we live in today, where one country's belief or religious beliefs have changed the borders over another, and so we've seen that happen through human conflict and other things. What's happening now is more really like people questioning the centralized systems of governance for the first time, and where a lot of people take for granted, even in democracies around the world, they take for granted their kind of role in governance, and people don't actually participate in the kind of governmental process, right? Or feel disenchanted by it. And so what I think, at the country level, we're eventually going to see this innovation with cryptocurrencies lead towards more active participation from the masses in individual governments.
I see. That's a very interesting idea. And, here on my podcast, I interviewed before many people especially from Hong Kong, from China, from the Middle East, but you are actually the first person from the US being featured on my podcast. So that's why I wanted to ask you a bit about the current approach in the US to cryptos and in general to blockchain technology. So if you could please tell a bit more to our listeners about this.
I think with the US, it's one of those things, like in a lot of industries, and a lot of times the regulations here, people from all over the world look towards it for guidance. And unfortunately, early on, and I was in New York before with the New York bit license that was created, it kind of set the US at a little bit of a disadvantage with having too onerous regulations. And it was really driven by the existing financial institutions trying to preserve their position, a position of strength, really, and have digital currency companies kind of operate at a disadvantage. Now we've seen, Benjamin Lawsky, who drafted and enacted those measures, has actually joined a number of cryptocurrency companies. So to me, that's some of the worst interplay between government and the government and the corporate world of enacting policy and then going and financially benefiting from being the person who enacted that policy. But I think what's happened, and there's been a nice interplay, and we're starting to see this play out at the Senate level and Congress level, where there's starting to be more pro-crypto congressmen, and what's happening is they're definitely open to listen to a lot of the entrepreneurs in the crypto space. They see the importance of this technology. They're getting up to speed on mining and understanding, all right, well, it actually matters where all of the mining supply is taking place, and so I think I'd say it's a positive in the sense that the government is being more open-minded towards listening, and we'll see where they end up coming in terms of how onerous the regulations are going forward or not, and how much they try to promote the innovation as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, it's always difficult for the law and for regulations to catch up at the same speed than technology does. I mean, I know it myself because I initially studied law, so the law always goes much slower. So it's all about trying to make this gap shorter than usual, I guess.
Right.
And well, now leaving the US and going to China, that China is about to launch its digital yuan. They are speeding up this process very intensely lately. So I wanted to ask you about your take on central bank digital currencies, and also how do you see its coexistence with privately issued cryptocurrencies, especially stablecoins?
Sure. So, I think it's still going to be an interesting kind of way that it plays out. We don't know yet how it's going to play out between governments issuing, their own digital currencies as CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, and the existing stable coins that have kind of already been brought to the market. I think right now most of the people from within the cryptocurrency space, right, already have zero interest in CBDCs. They like the idea of when they want to take their money out of the crypto assets, putting them into stable coins and holding the value there, and they actually don't want to put it back into the traditional financial system. Right. And so, I think that's going to be an interesting interplay, and that's going to be where, we might see some governments really try to restrict stablecoin usage and kind of mandate that individuals around the world use their CBDCs. But ultimately, people forget most currencies as they exist today are already digital assets, right? Each government has a electronic ledger. They press a button and determine what the supply is, and they press a button and they issue more and more of it, right? So it's already digital in that nature. It's just not existing on a publicly available ledger. So, I'm a little bit skeptical that there's going to be any real innovation around CBDCs, but I hope I'm wrong, and I hope we start to see some, really interesting things come out of that.
I think that regardless of whether there is or no innovation in that area, I think that to me the target audience of CBDCs and that of cryptocurrencies is different. Therefore, whenever you hear people saying that central banks are creating CBDCs to fight cryptos, to me that statement doesn't make much sense, no? Because whoever invests in cryptos and trades cryptos is not going, as you said before, no, to go back to the traditional financial system just because the CBDC is digital. No, I think CBDCs may be an effective tool, of course, when it comes to making payments more efficient or promoting financial inclusion or for many other purposes. No, but I don't think that there is that degree of direct competition between the cryptos and CBDCs.
Right, I agree.
And well, now moving forward to another related topic, a very interesting one, I would like to discuss NFTs with you. So going to the very beginning, if you could please tell our listeners some general ideas about what NFTs are and what's their potential.
Sure. So, again, similar to how Bitcoin wasn't the first digital currency, the NFTs that we see and exist today weren't the first NFTs, right? So the term NFTs, non-fungible tokens, the idea of them has existed. Really, if you think about it as unique digital assets that aren't fungible with other digital assets, if we go back to the beginning of the internet, right? Some of the original NFTs I think of are web domains, right? So that's a unique digital asset that individual people are able to purchase and own, and it turns out have tremendous value, right? And we've seen a number of small, low character domains trade for significant sums. In the crypto space, there was a large transaction. Voice.com was acquired for $30 million. I know Bitcoin.com and a friend of mine recently purchased Satoshi.com. And then early last year, with some partners, we were able to acquire NFT.com. And so that was kind of our big play in the NFT space. And so that's now a subsidiary of Immutable Holdings, which we took public in Canada, and that's going to be launched soon in the coming months. So in terms of NFTs, really, I like to paint this broad view that it's not just about digital art and the phenomenon that's happening today. While it's an important part and it's opened up, consumer eyes and attention, I think OpenSea, one of the largest NFT platforms, they recently raised money at a 13 billion valuation, and their transaction volume went from tens of millions to, I think it was 15 billion as of the beginning of this year. And so we're really seeing a ton of activity there, and that's going to now drive innovation into all of these other areas of NFTs. So for me, the way I think about it is, cryptocurrencies can and may disrupt everything we do with money. NFTs may disrupt everything else. So every other form of ownership, whether it's short, long, medium-term ownership over housing assets or other real estate assets, whether it's a car, whether it's unique pieces of art, physical art that you have, whether it's watches, other collectibles, other forms of things that confer value but don't necessarily have a value. So if you're a seed investor into Uber, right, and you have an NFT that represents that you made that investment, that is separate from your actual investment into Uber. After you sell out your shares, once it grows as a public company, you still having that NFT, right, to represent that you were a seed investor, it confers value to me and anybody else who meets you that you're somebody who has access to early opportunities like that, or at least that one, and that you're somebody that maybe is helpful to investing in those kind of companies, or maybe has access to other companies like that.
Well, I mean, definitely, based on what you said now, we can see that the potential is huge. Is there, though, any downside to NFTs? And if so, how could we solve those?
Yeah, I mean, I guess there'll be a lot of downside and friction, and there always is. Right now, with the hype around a lot of these digital art NFTs, I've been telling people really to kind of slow down and have a bit of more rationality around it and skepticism. And I think somewhere between 90 and 95%, if not 99% of all NFTs that exist today are going to be fundamentally worthless. But I tell people, just put in perspective, I also think 90 to 99% of art is worthless, right? And what I mean by that is that what usually happens in the traditional art world is you or I, we buy a piece of art for, X amount, and then it sits on our wall, right? And we might be thinking, okay, we paid this much for it, so it's worth that much. That's the way we think of the art value. Eventually, we move to another house, we decide, all right, well, I don't want that anymore, or I don't want it here, but I'm going to keep it, and I put it in storage. Now, in my mind, it's still worth what I paid for it, right? Or hopefully, I think it's gone up in value. Most likely, what happens is it sits in storage, and eventually, I give it to my brother, or I give it away to somebody else, and I tell them it's worth that much. But again, it never gets resold for that value again, right? And so that's what I think is going to happen with a lot of the stuff happening in the NFT world today.
Well, I would like to ask you as well something that you kind of replied now already, but still, I mean, imagine that there is like someone like very interested in art, sports, music, etc. Someone like that, but who's reluctant, to tap into the NFT space because that person is unsure about the actual potential. Maybe they think it's just a passing fad. What would you say to these people? How would you convince them about the actual potential and value of NFTs?
Well, I would actually say they're coming at it with the right mentality. And I'd say that's great. It's good for them to be skeptical. Now, what they should also do is they should be a bit more curious, and they should go out and try to find things that excite them, or use whatever background they come from, right? Whether it's real estate or entertainment or law or economics or finance, and then try to find the areas within the NFT and the broader, crypto market today that actually excite them or pique their curiosity. Right, I get contacted every day by different friends and contacts in the industry and across the world who are asking me, "Oh, what crypto should I buy?" Or I want to put 100,000, a million, or more into NFTs. Like, what should I be buying? And I really try to discourage them and tell them to kind of put in the work first and try to understand the market before throwing money at it.
That's actually very wise advice, and I've had this experience myself as well. People asking you where to invest, that's very common, but as you said before, it's all about understanding first the market and then tapping into the opportunities that you find in it.
Right.
And well, now before wrapping this up, I would like to ask you some predictions for this year. And well, first of all, now that 2021 has been left behind, what predictions do you have for this year, 2022? In the blockchain and crypto area? Like, for example, are we going to keep seeing like so many institutional investors tapping into cryptos? Do you think this trend will change?
Yeah, so I love putting some predictions out there. And I guess, even now I'm spending time reading everybody else's predictions and all the things that are happening. I think just thematically, we're going to continue to see the rise of DeFi, decentralized finance. We're going to see that grow with more and more capital, going into different protocols and new things that are set up. We'll see many more new decentralized exchanges be set up, and a lot more options and derivatives activity. And then a lot of other areas of traditional finance that we're going to see kind of decentralized applications experiment with disrupting, right? And so we'll see that happen. We'll continue to see these other newer layer one protocols attract a lot of innovation and kind of interest from developers and investors. And I think we'll see a renewed interest in privacy at some point this year, and ZK snarks as a technology and other aspects there. And then what else? And then, like I said before, I do think institutions are going to continue to get more and more involved and find things that they want to invest in, and from the amount of capital that's been raised in the venture capital world in the past year or two, and also private equity that's going to start putting money to work in the space, and then at the government level as well. And so I think we see more countries both take a favorable approach towards cryptocurrencies and then also actually invest in them directly as well. Yeah, so I think I'll leave it there. And I also say, in terms of the overall crypto asset market cap sitting at about 2 trillion today, I think there'll be volatility, and we could see 50% pullbacks from here and other stuff. But at the same time, I've as much conviction as ever that this is going to grow from here and be a 5, 10, $20 trillion industry and more growing from here.
Mm-hmm. And do you think there is like any sector that is going to emerge this year? Like, for example, NFTs, even though they existed much before last year, they experienced this hype after last March, approximately. So is there like any area within blockchain or within any other technology that you think that may and will emerge this year?
Well, I guess, so, a couple other things I didn't really touch on were DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, and metaverse. And then we're just going to see what this year is going to be is after all the explosion of, new things that emerged last year, this year will be a lot of kind of fitting the pieces together and seeing what makes sense, what's too hyped, what's not. And then really seeing, this interplay of corporates, institutions, individuals, all kind of figuring stuff out as we go. And of course, there'll be some new themes that emerge. Some people are focused on social tokens. That's why I bring up more privacy theme. And I think, there will 100% be, 1 or 2 or 3 things that we're not seeing today that are going to emerge as important themes. So that's another reason why I tell people to really, be curious and, seek out those opportunities and not feel like it's too late or anything like that.
No, but I like this approach because it's what you said. Last year it feels like many new areas emerged. So right now it's like the time to like put all the pieces of the puzzle together and try to see which areas are like maybe hyped and which ones have an actual value.
Right, exactly.
This puts an end to our discussion. It's been an absolute pleasure to hosting you, David, and speaking with you for this half hour approximately. And we've learned a lot from you. And so, for that, thank you very much.
Yeah, of course. No, I enjoy being here. Thanks for having me.
And thank you all, dear listeners, for listening to this episode of my podcast. And stay tuned for the next episode. Thank you very much. Bye all.